what is a conspiracy or esoteric thing you've looked into? Kind of a two-part question. One that you went into thinking it was total bullshit and maybe you got flipped a little bit, and then maybe another you went into kind of convinced and then you unconvinced yourself through the research. Or if either one's better, just go with it.
So when I was incarcerated and I was reading books and stuff, and prisoners would come up to me, this is back in almost 20 years ago now, prisoners would come up to me and say, you didn't get away with your ecstasy trafficking because you never paid off the cops and the politicians, and don't you know the CIA brings the coke in? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, these guys are just disgruntled because they're in here and making this stuff up. And now I've written a whole war on drugs series of books documenting everything I was told. I wrote America Made about Barry Seal, the pilot that was bringing the coke into Arkansas for George H.W. Bush. And Bill Clinton was providing the state security, the state troopers. And because Clinton played ball with the CIA, he got awarded the White House. And back then, Clinton's brother Roger got busted buying coke for Bill. And he got busted on the video saying to the undercover cop, "My brother's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner." So I can't argue. You can't argue that conspiracy is not true anymore.
Yeah, that the Clintons and the CIA, I guess. When was this? When was this period? Because I know.
So George H.W. Bush, Oliver North, Felix Rodriguez, these were the CIA guys. They were bringing the coke in. Barry Seal was flying the weapons down to Nicaragua. And then they were bringing the coke back in to Arkansas. And it was all going very well until two young boys were found dead on the railway tracks who had stumbled upon the operation. They'd been executed, laid side by side on the railway tracks, and it was made to look like the train had run over them. And one of the dads worked on the train tracks, and he knew that was impossible. The fact that the blood was not fresh was a heads up to the emergency service that arrived on the scene. But what did the Clintons do? They brought in, what's his name? Fahmy Malek, the coroner, a coroner who helped Bill's mum get out of a situation. And Fahmy Malek's verdict was the boys had smoked so much weed, they'd gone into a psychosis and laid side by side on the railway tracks, and the train had run over them. And to this day, Linda Ives, the mum of one of them, is still campaigning for justice for her kid. She's confronted Bill Clinton. He's blown her off over the years. And my book, Clinton, Bush, and CIA Conspiracies, it's the stories of four people whose lives weave together, and they include Linda Ives, Gary Webb, and Kiki Camarena, the guy who Narcos Mexico is about.
Mm.
Oh, yeah. Wait, isn't he the guy who was tortured to death horribly?
Yes. Well, I knew a pilot for the Sinaloa cartel who was involved in things back then. He was an American guy, and he worked both sides. He's dead now. That's the only reason I'm authorized to tell these stories, because he died a few years ago. He said, "Don't ever say any of this stuff while I'm alive." And he told me that he did work for both sides. He worked for the cartel and he worked for the feds. And when he never murdered anyone when he was working for the cartel. He only murdered people when he was working for the US government. And he explained to me how it all worked. So from the very beginning, where the prisoners were telling me that this conspiracy exists and I wasn't believing them. Mm-hmm. Now I'm speaking to an actual cartel pilot who knew all about the CIA and the deals the cartels have with the US government and the weapons they buy in exchange. So here's how it's set up. You'll have one cartel, for example, El Chapo, who's working with the Mexican government. And they're buying all these weapons from America to fight the war on drugs. But those weapons are applied to the rival cartels. So the Mexican government can say, "Yeah, America, we're fighting the war on drugs. Look at all these raids we're making." But they're wiping out El Chapo's enemy. But it gets to the point where El Chapo gets so powerful, the government has to hand him over to America. So the cartel leaders are fall guys. Most of that money from the cocaine sales ends up permanently in the hands of the Mexican government, the heads of the army, the heads of the police. It doesn't matter who they arrest, Chapo, Escobar, Cali, these guys just come and go. They are the bogeymen in the war on drugs. Most of the money is going to the biggest mafia in the world, which is the politicians. And from the early parts of the Mexican cartel in the 80s, the president of Mexico, he retired to a castle in Ireland with $500 million net worth which could not be explained the source of. And I believe that that's where he lives to this day.
I mean, if you want to,
really nice.
If you're trying to escape as a former Mexican drug lord, a castle in Ireland is like the furthest away you could get.
So what you're saying is this guy's dope as fuck. Is that the core?
Taylor,
But his fucking castle's awesome.
Taylor, when an investigator shows up at his castle, what's the accent he uses to convince them he's a good old local Irish boy?
He used to run drugs. He's like, drop a point to your Witcher. He just does that. No, I'm just trying to, just enjoy, I don't know, the color green. What the fuck is going on here? Cheese, is that a thing? Like that is insane. So, and it's easy. Like I know because I like the HW stuff is wild. It's easy to just forget because like when someone becomes president, it's like you think of them like, oh, that was that president, and you don't think about like that leading up to it. Like HW was like an absolute garbage piece of shit head of the CIA for a long time, like actively taking place and destabilizing South American governments, moving coke. He helped create, I think, like he was, I think, ahead of the CIA when they began that like fucking over black people with crack in inner city areas, or maybe it was the guy before him. But like
Clinton and him ramped it up, and George H.W. Bush was asked at a private dinner, how on earth can you be running this war on drugs while bringing the drugs in? How can you get away with that? And Bush's answer was, it's so far removed from the possibilities of what may be happening in the Americans' minds, no one would ever believe it were possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if you told someone like, oh, the US is assisting the cartels in moving drugs because it's financially beneficial to them, you'd be like, no, nah. and then like that would be it. Oh, that guy's a kooky conspiracy theorist. He seems to think that these giant multi-billion-dollar international businesses have shady shit going on.
Yeah, and Clinton,
these illegal businesses.
And Clinton, like I said, who his brother got busted buying coke for him, he ended up locking a record amount of non-violent drug users, including women, hundreds of thousands of them, to fill the private prisons. So the hypocrisy is absolutely staggering.
At the time, there was this like culture war against these, what they call them, super predators or something like that. And the idea was that,
remember the Clinton?
That's the Hillary.
It was
thing.
Hillary, I remember. Yeah.
There was this thought process that like people were going to prison, learning how to be very good prisoners, teaching each other, lifting weights, and they were coming out like jacked and scarier and better trained and becoming better prisoners. And that's 3 strikes you're out kind of got employed. And at being tough on crime was a very politically popular position to take, and all of America was lined up. I was lined up. I think I was wrong, but that's what I believed at the time.
Yeah,
because
it's easy to get most of the population lined up on stuff. Like when you look back and you realize stuff like that, it's like
crime.
Crime. Who's for child pornography? No one's for that, but they use it to launder censorship. People who consume it aren't against it, but like they launder in internet bills in the modern day where, oh, you don't want to be tracked with your real name and shit. Well, you must want pedophiles to win. And it's like, well, no, just because you can't vote against the Child Online Protection Act without seeming like a monster, even if that act has a bunch of shit in there that's about tracking people, Yeah. So they can always launder what they want through the media.
Yeah, and the media was showing, all these crack monsters and crack babies. And also, they portray that prisoners are just pedophiles, rapists, serial killers. But when I got there, I saw the average arrest was a young person with a bit of weed getting like a 2 to 5 year sentence. And if you look at the stats, at the peak of the war on drugs, the highest arrest category was weed possession, almost 1 million arrests a year. Crazy. They go in as potheads, they become heroin addicts, they become Nazis, they've got criminal records, they don't stand a chance, their lives are ruined. They give them $50 on the door, they say, have a nice day when they're getting released, and they come right back. As soon as they come back, $60,000 of taxpayers' money to the prison.
Yeah.
By design.
A regular person of the public, I'm talking about me at that time, felt like they were in there for armed robbery. They were in there for mugging. They were in there for like, I don't know, beating up nice people who didn't do anything.
Because that's what the news, like I remember the news isn't like this anymore, but I remember growing up, the news being a lot about like the 8 crimes that happened tonight.
Are you kidding? That's exactly what the news is now.
Oh, well, to me, it's about politics. Maybe
I guess I watch I think what it is, I watch cable news instead of local news now. But growing up, we had local news. I didn't have CNN growing up. I think we had the channel, but nobody knew how to dial it in. So we'd watch 4, 7, and 13 and 21 or whatever our local stations were, and you'd hear about the crimes of the night. And so, like, those were the people you thought of when you thought criminal. You thought the guy wearing a mask who's going to beat you up at night and rob you, or break into your house, or rape, or murder.
Bad boys. What you gonna do?
Dude,
what you gonna do when they come?
You imagine the most intense, heartless killers.
Will Smith led me wrong. I watched that movie and I took it to be a historical documentary, and that is not how law is enforced.